So as Nick mentioned, my name is Jakub Konieczny. I'm a senior analyst at Analysys Mason. So before we go into details about the A2P market, I just wanted to briefly introduce the Analysys Mason and myself as well. So Analysys Mason is a consultant and research company specializing in technology, media, and telecom sector. I've been working in the company for about 7 years, analyzing extensively the telecoms market. And some of my specialization include the A2P messaging market, and more recently also the network API market. Okay, closer.
Thank you.
And also the network API market, which relates highly to the authentication part of the A2P market. So today I will go firstly through the general trends in the A2P market, so the A2P messaging and traffic and spend. Further, I will go through the distribution among different channels. And finally, I'll present some of the threats that we could face in the near future in the A2P market. To start off with, I wanted to focus on the A2P messaging traffic. So the good news is that the growth will remain healthy in terms of number of messages. In the previous years, we saw a compound annual growth rate around 12%, and we expect it to slow down to around 6%. However, it's still going to remain strong. We expect more brands to adopt digital and mobile communication channels to contact customers and also recruit new ones. The growth will be slightly slower as areas were affected by COVID-19 pandemic, but the growth will still remain healthy. Moving on to the A2P messaging spend, we expect the growth to be slower than in terms of A2P traffic. So historically, it's been very aligned with the A2P traffic, so the growth was around 13%, whereas traffic was around 12%, so slightly higher. We expect that between 2025 and 2030, the growth will be around 3%. So as you might remember from the previous slide, we're expecting around 6% growth in traffic. And the reason behind this slowdown will be the change in distribution of channels due to disruption of some channels like SMS. And we'll come back to those slides later, but now I wanted to just go briefly on what the trends are in different channels. So before we go into a further analysis, I just wanted to briefly explain you how Analysys Mason define different channels. So firstly, we have SMS, which includes the basic SMS and MMS messages started and ended on the operator network. Then we have RBM, which stands for RCS Business Messaging. In this category, we also include some legacy IP-based messages delivered by operators. And then finally, third-party apps, so apps such as WhatsApp, so next-generation communication services. And moving on to the actual trends in the market. So in terms of SMS, we expect the popularity to SMS to decline significantly because of price competition, but also the futures competition. So the traffic will decline by around 33% between 2024 and 2030. This decline will be driven by increasing prices in some regions, which are already high, and the price competition for third-party app, but also increasing issues around frauds and artificially inflated traffic, which affected the trust in SMS and generally the reliability of the channel. In terms of price per message, we saw some big increases in prices in the last 2 years in some regions, such as Africa, emerging Asia Pacific, Latin America, and some countries in Central and Eastern Europe. In SMS-heavy markets such as North America and Western Europe, the prices remained more stable as operators maintained the stable growth progression and kept the prices reasonable, essentially. In general, the price will remain much higher than third-party app, and we expect it to continue to grow at a slow rate. This increase in the price per message will offset partially the decline in the traffic. However, the A2P messaging spend will still be significantly hit and will decline by around 29% during the same period. Moving on to the RBM. So we expect the RBM to grow substantially during the forecast period. So it will increase by over 400% between 2024 and 2030. The growth will be from a small base, which explains the high percentage, obviously. According to our estimates, just in 2024, the traffic more than tripled, and this is due to ongoing adoption of RBM by operators and aggregators. And the Apple's decision to add RBM to iOS systems significantly improved the reach and also accelerated the adoption in 2024, and this trend is expected to continue from 2025 onwards. In terms of price per message, the situation will be pretty much exactly the same as SMS. So RBM is priced very similarly to SMS. The basic messages are priced at the same level, and the messages with rich features are expected to be priced above the SMS level. The increase in RBM pricing will be in line with SMS, which will drive the A2P messaging spend, or RBM, to be even stronger than the growth in the traffic. And in general, we expect North America, Western Europe, and developed Asia Pacific to be the regions with the highest adoption of RBM, mainly because of the SMS prices remaining stable in those markets, still high shares of SMS, but also a big interest of operators and aggregators in those markets. So for example, if North America, we see already all operators having RBM, and for example, Infobip reported 14 times increase in RBM traffic just in 2024 in that region. So moving on to the third-party app. So the growth in third-party app will be significant. We expect over 80% of growth in the traffic between 2024 and 2030. In fact, most of the A2P traffic growth will come via this channel. We've seen a growth not only in historically strong sectors for WhatsApp, like marketing and promotions, customer service, but also some shift to authentication. So some big brands such as Microsoft decided to switch from SMS to WhatsApp. We're also seeing brands like Yahoo, obviously the meta companies like Instagram and Facebook utilizing WhatsApp as a cheaper alternative. In terms of regions, we expect that in Asia Pacific, the adoption will be the strongest. It's been strongest historically, especially in China, where WeChat is dominating. However, other regions where we saw the big price increases, we'll start looking into this option as an alternative. In terms of price per message, the price point of third-party app is low compared to SMS, and we expect it to decline. So WhatsApp continues to adjust its pricing to make it more flexible, introducing new conversations category, free service conversations, and things like that. And we expect this trend to continue, which will drive the decline in price per message. And this decline in price per message will affect the A2P spend, which will increase at a slower rate than traffic. So now moving back onto the slides which I showed you at the beginning. So we talked about the traffic, and we said that the growth will remain healthy. So now if you put the different distribution channels, we can see that most of the traffic growth will actually come via third-party app, whereas SMS and RBM will account for a smaller part of the market, and that the share will be roughly equal, with SMS still accounting for more of it. Moving on to the A2P spend, I mentioned also that the growth in A2P messaging spend will be lower than the traffic, and this will be driven by changes in the channel distribution. So if we look at the channel distribution now, we can see that, as I mentioned earlier, the growth in traffic will be driven mainly by third-party app. And also third-party app will be one of the only channel with declining price per message, so consequently its revenue will grow at a slower rate. And this will affect the A2P messaging spend significantly. However, SMS, because of its higher prices, despite a much slower share of traffic, will still account for majority of A2P messaging spend. And similarly, because RBM will be priced similarly, it will account for a significant portion of the market as well. To summarize our forecast as prepared as of February 2025, we forecast that there will be around 3 trillion A2P messages by 2030, and the businesses will spend around USD 34 billion on A2P messaging by 2030. However, the A2P market is changing rapidly, and it's facing new threats every day. So since we published our forecast back in February, we already identified 2 new threats. So firstly, Google decided to drop SMS. So as you might know, Google is rolling out QR codes as a replacement of SMS for authentication for Gmail. This is a significant message for the market. Firstly, because Google is actually the company that's investing heavily in RBM, so this move kind of put in question RBM usage for authentication. But also, when you look at the numbers themselves, Gmail has around 2 billion active accounts, which receive billions of A2P SMS messages for authentication every year, and this part of the market will be gone. But the impact will not be limited just to that. When you consider Google is the first technology company that decided to make that move, but we also have other technology companies like Microsoft, Meta, Apple, that also have alternative ways of authenticating users, and they could potentially follow suit with Google and decide to drop this way of authentication completely to use some cheaper alternatives. And this could actually be the impact on the market, because when we think about share of OTP messaging, we believe that this is around 15 to 20%. So the potential loss, depending on how many companies decide to make that move, could mean that potentially we could see by 2030 around 15-20% of the A2P SMS RBM market being lost. Again, depending how many companies decide to follow that move. And secondly, we also identified introduction of number verify version 2 as a potential threat. So as some of you might know, the network APIs are gaining a lot of traction at the moment, and a lot of operators and aggregators are working on it. Some of them, such as SIM swap and location verification, are designed to work along RBM and SMS to provide this extra layer of protection and prevent fraud. But some of them, such as number verify, are designed to actually replace SMS OTP completely. So the way it works, rather than sending you an SMS code that you need to type in, it actually retrieves the phone number directly from your SIM card on the device that you're requesting authentication, and the process is completely seamless. You don't have to do anything, and it's also much less prone to fraud and generally cheaper as well compared to SMS OTP. So all the benefits. Unfortunately for number verify and positively for A2P markets, number verify version 1.0.0 had its limitation and couldn't work on the Wi-Fi network, which is a major obstacle because it just couldn't work just on the mobile network, because users are quite often in home Wi-Fi network and they still need to authenticate the devices. However, the number verify version 2.0, which was released in March this year, found a solution to that and can now work both on mobile and Wi-Fi networks, which present a major breakthrough in the market and could potentially open up for a much broader adoption. So we currently have big operators like Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, looking into this option. I mean, we have alliances like Aduna and Bridge Alliance forming, looking also into number verify, and generally it's a big topic. As a consequence, Analysys Mason forecasted that number verify could generate over 200 billion API calls by 2030, and this is equivalent to messages sent. So if we compare it to OTP messages, it could mean that potentially we could lose up to 7% of the A2P messaging market due to number verify if it's successful. And this is based on the numbers we currently have, which are very small bases. So in the future, if more operators look into it, we could see even higher revenue losses. However, obviously, number verify will be rolled out by operators, so some of that revenue will come back to them. However, it won't be equivalent to SMS OTP, as the prices are much lower. So to conclude today's session, the key takeaways would be that A2P traffic and A2P messaging spend are expected to grow between 2025 and 2030. So we're still seeing a healthy growth in reporting of aggregators, and we expect this trend to continue as brands continue to add new channels to contact customers and attract new ones, especially in terms of marketing. So especially conversational marketing is a big topic right now, so RBM and a third-party app. Secondly, the channel distribution will change drastically, with most of the traffic growth coming via third-party app, which is a bad news for SMS. However, SMS could still track some of the traffic that would be lost otherwise to third-party app through RBM, so it's a good time to look into that aspect. And finally, the A2P market faces new threats every day, and more challenges are expected to arise in the future. So as you can see, we already have a Google decision having a very big impact, and network APIs also having a big impact, and we essentially don't know what might happen in a year from now. So right now we're saying that could lead to like 27% of A2P market being gone, and if some more big news come in the future, we could expect the market to shrink even further. So thank you for listening to my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Jakub. That was great. Any questions? We got the mic. We're missing somebody to hand the mic. Let me see if... There you go, Stefano. Try not to fall.
Thank you, Nick. Stefano Nicoletti from Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Many thanks for the very, very interesting presentation. In terms of the adoptions of alternative forms of the authentication, I guess SMS have the great advantage there that ubiquitous, everybody knows how to use them, including those that are not very tech savvy. Some others, forms of authentication require a bit more of digital expertise, let's call it like that, particularly for, I'm thinking people that are not older people and with disabled. And what do you think this will represent? A barrier to adoption, or because your number seems to suggest there will be increasingly substantially. So I'm just curious, to my mind, have you taken into account these aspects?
So in terms of RBM, there's no limitation. As Adam mentioned, essentially you get a message and it's essentially the same thing. You don't even recognize what the difference is. WhatsApp is a big difference because you receive it from an app, but we're seeing the uptake of WhatsApp growing essentially in all the regions. So more and more people use it, so it's more widely available. And that was the main limitation in the past, that to reach WhatsApp users, they actually had to be WhatsApp users in the first place. But we're seeing more. Obviously, in the older generation, it will be more problematic because they're less prone to use it. But we still see some growing uptake because, even with older people, you still have kids and basically introducing them to WhatsApp as a way of communication because it's cheaper and easier, especially with a lot of immigration. So we have people migrating to different countries and they still want to talk to their family. And WhatsApp, Facebook, those kind of communication methods that are much cheaper than voice calls. So automatically people start to use it more. So there is a much more opportunity for that, for sure, than it was in the past. In terms of number verify, network API, I don't see any issues and obstacles in this sense because it works just in background and it's seamless. You won't actually even know. You don't need to do anything, essentially. The question would be how companies use this in a sense to prove to you that whatever you were doing was actually authenticated. Because for social media, it's not as relevant because you just want to get into social media and that's fine. But for, important bank transactions, you still want to make sure that your bank actually verified and not just push it through. So they will have to develop some sort of push notifications to confirm that the transaction has been verified, which could lead to some obstacles in terms of adoption because SMS is still seen as a secure way from an end-user perspective that you put that OTP code and you feel safe in a sense that you verified your transaction, whereas this one will be more in the background. So there would be some obstacles in this sense and some solution would need to be developed to make sure that end user is actually happy with the way the process is being run.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So
I think we've got
Lee, Ellie, and then John.
So Lee, is it?
Lee first.
Lee first.
Hi. In your forecast, have you taken account of the growth of agentic conversations? And if you have, where do you think those conversations will take place?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? What's conversations?
Agentic, in other words, how we engage with AI, essentially ChatGPT, right? Or others are available.
No, those are not included in this forecast. Those are purely like marketing conversation, reminders, notification. This is kind of a conversation. It's not the chatbots.
Do you not think that's a huge area of growth for A2P?
It is most definitely huge growth for the A2P forecast as well, because we're interacting with chatbots more and more every day. But yeah, for this particular forecast, it wasn't included.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, thank you. Ellie? Mic hand over.
Hi, good morning. Ellie Katz, CEO of XConnect and Sakura. Just to highlight, I fully agree with your assessment of the number verify and the migration that we're going to start seeing from SMS OTP towards number verify. Interesting to hear whether any particular markets or any particular segments that are looking like they are the first adopters of this and what those drivers are.
So in terms of migration to WhatsApp and third-party app, The regions where we see it more is obviously the Asia Pacific, where users are more tend to use the third-party app. I mean, it's not necessarily WhatsApp there, it's a WeChat as well in China. We're seeing more and more transition to that in North America and Western Europe and generally in Europe. However, those markets are still SMS heavy, so it's more of a future trend. In terms of the use cases, obviously in the past this was mainly marketing and promotional, especially nowadays with the conversational marketing. You kind of want your user to be able to conduct whole transaction within the message. So WhatsApp is very well suited for that. But we're seeing also more traction in authentication. As I mentioned, some big brands like Microsoft and Yahoo are seeing this as an alternative to SMS. And this is especially with the revision in WhatsApp pricing in 2023. So they introduced new conversation categories. So previously, everything was priced the same. Now they have a free conversation categories for authentication, utility messages, and marketing. So obviously, the promotional messages are priced way more, but authentication is even lower now, which is a much bigger competition to SMS OTP as it was in the past, because it's even cheaper nowadays.
And from a MNO API, from a number verify perspective, a different perspective of how that impacts the markets and the segments, just from the MNO API perspective of the number verify.
Sorry, could you repeat?
I'm sorry, you've given a good answer from a WhatsApp perspective,
oh, yes,
and looking from a
verify.
MNO API such as number verify.
So number verify, the main use cases are obviously like social media. So right now you verify your identity by your phone number. So you need to put it and then you're getting some confirmations. So this is being seen as a big traction market because it could be much seamless. In general, for transactions, for example, it's being seen as for small commercial transactions, seen as a big opportunity because users might find more friction with OTP SMS, especially if it doesn't arrive or there is a delay. This is much faster, much more seamless. Obviously, the banking, the financial institutions, because of the activity around fraud, this is being seen as a big opportunity. But as I mentioned, they will have to find a way to make sure the user is happy with what it's being seen on the screen. Because if you just run a transaction, there's nothing popping up, and you just feel like, I just paid a lot of money and no one actually verified it, it makes you a bit concerned. So there is a bit of a friction there, but I'm pretty sure there will be a way to develop some push notification from an app to tell you that the transaction was verified and has been successful.
Thank you.
So here in banking and social media, main driving force is there. I think got one more from John.
Hi, John Brenner, CEO of Aegis. Question for you. So in looking at your forecasts, I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of the analysis on scams going on A2P SMS, we're seeing a larger push towards getting people to move off the SMS and go on to the encrypted over-the-top channels. That way they can commit the fraud, in theory, there. So that said, is any of that taken into account? Because trust in messaging, trust in voice is a huge push globally. And as we see declining volumes and channels, we can expect the fraud to move to other channels. So one, have you taken into account any of that in your forecasts? And secondly, there is the possibility that the mobile operators actually might get more competitive in pricing on a global basis should SMS start declining. Has any of that been taken into account in your forecast?
So to answer your first question about the fraud activity, so it's been taken into account. The A2P market, as I mentioned, OTP accounts for around 15-20% of the market maximum. So we're expecting the other use cases to be more dominating in the future. So essentially marketing, promotional, customer service, reminders, notification, and those kind of use cases are more likely to benefit from WhatsApp. So there is obviously more traction there. We expect less migration in authentication because still when you make a transaction, the SMS, you're going to receive it 100% of the case if you have a network connection. With WhatsApp, it depends on the data connectivity and so on, so there's more limitation to that. So for social media, Microsoft accounts and things like that, there's a higher use case for that because it's more reliable on whether you actually receive that code. And also, a lot of aggregators have a fallback option for SMS. So in case they cannot send a message through WhatsApp, they will send it through SMS. So for banking, that's a solution essentially. But banks are less likely to move away from SMS. They more stick to what they've been using so far. So in this regard, network API would have more traction than third-party app. Because financial institutions, especially the fintechs, are in the talks with big vendors and aggregators in network API markets.
Great. I think we're up for time. Thank you ever so much, Jakub. That was fantastic. Thank you.